Hello and welcome back to Chatting with Chaz. I'm so glad you're here. Let me introduce myself for those of you that may not know me and you've just tuned in. My name is Chaz. I'll be your host. And I am the creative director and founder of Linen and Flax Co., a lifestyle brand founded here in Roswell, Georgia. This brand began with a passion, with a purpose, and it has evolved. And it has evolved into this podcast, sitting here with you, talking about life, sharing stories, real stories, some really fun, some really pretty, some really messy. Today is no exception. Today we're going to talk about a messy part of life, divorce. No one likes to talk about it. It's kind of the big D word, right? But I feel like it's important to talk about it because the whole creation of this podcast was to go deeper. Remember, we met on Instagram and stories, and we started talking about recipes and kids and home and fashion and all things beautiful. But then my life started to look messy, and I decided to talk about that with you, but I could only go so far. It was on stories, it was on Instagram. So this podcast is really created to go deeper and to really engage with you and talk to you about the harder things in life, the great things in life, to learn and grow and inspire. And I hope that's what we'll do. And today, I think we'll do just that. Talking about something really hard that 1 out of 2 people go through, 2 marriages go through, divorce. It is, again, something pretty common, but when it happens to you, you feel like you're the only one. And for me, I felt like, well, that would never happen because I found my happy ending, or so it seemed. Remember when we met here, we talked about in episode 1, my childhood. We talked about the abuse that I went through and some pretty bad patterns with a pedophile. In episode number 2, we talked about the healing of that, the conviction of the pedophile, standing up against the abuser, and really learning and growing into the woman I was called to be. In episode 3, we talked about the evolution of me and this brand that came out of difficult things. God grooming me and healing me and poising me for just this purpose, the reason I sit here today on this couch. But in the midst of a lot of that story, there was something I wasn't talking about, and that was a marriage that was in crisis. You know, you heard in episode 1 and 2, I had a habit of smiling and looking pretty during difficult times. I continued that pattern in my marriage. And I became quite comfortable smiling and looking pretty. And we became kind of the face of Roswell. I mean, not really, but my kids thought that. At school functions, at sports games, wherever, a grand opening at my store, my family would be there. And we were smiling and looking pretty. And on the outward, it looked fine. And the inside, it was a mess. I sometimes compare it to Instagram. You know, you look at the beautiful boxes on Instagram and they're beautiful pictures, but behind the scenes of those pictures, there's a lot of pain. And I remember posting a picture one day of our home, and it was a picture after the snow had just fallen. It was beautiful, and it was literally a dreamy picture. It's probably the most likes I've ever gotten on a picture. And as I looked at that post, sitting in my family room as the snow continued to fall, I thought, isn't it interesting? No one knows the pain that's happening in this home. No one knows what my children are going through. No one knows what I'm going through, what we are going through. And on Instagram, it looks perfect, all clothed in white. But behind the scenes, it was the complete opposite. We're going to talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to tell you how I got from someone who would never even utter the word divorce to someone that is now sitting with you and talking about divorce. Before I begin, I will assure you that I am not advocating a divorce at all. In fact, I hope you never have to go through it. I hope that you have a great marriage. And maybe through this, you'll learn ways to enhance your marriage. Maybe through this, you'll think, wow, I might need to think about something. And maybe through this, you'll be grateful that you have a great marriage and you never have to go through it. But I hope through my conversation with you, you walk away inspired. Maybe you learned something about yourself, and maybe you'll have the courage to do what's right for you and the kids if that's necessary. Now, as you remember in our last episode, I've now built this beautiful brand. When I was building this brand, when I was dreaming about this brand, one thing that was missing was a partnership. And that had been missing for years. I will tell you, I was married 21 years, and in this marriage, there was never a partnership. It really was a marriage of not a partnership. We'll just put it at that. And we never dreamed together. We never schemed together. I'm a dreamer, and I would always love to dream. I dream about what's it look like in 20 years? What's it look like in 5 years? What's it look like in 10 years? What does next year look like? What does spring look like? I always was dreaming about the next thing. And I never had a partner that dreamt with me. And it always just kind of made me sad, because I was like, what happens when the kids are off and we're empty nesters? What if we did this? And it was like, no, there was no dream. And then anytime that I had a glimpse of what my life could be, remember the woman that spoke over me when we went and sought prayer for our next step, when I was supporting his dreams? And she spoke over me, and she thought that I had a gift and a passion and a purpose. Remember, that was kind of laughed off. It wasn't really acknowledged. It was kind of like, I don't think she was really right on or trackable. So that was kind of how it worked in our home. Well, you also remember, as I was healing, I'd gotten married. I will be honest with you. I think because I was not whole and healed, I missed a lot of red flags. And one pattern I can recognize, that I married someone older, just like my first boyfriend, who was the abuser. Listen, I only had really 2 relationships. It was the abuser, and then the person I married. So I didn't have a lot to compare. So thinking that I met someone at church, which is where I met my husband at the time, and we were in ministry, and I was in ministry. He was working in the secular environment, but we would do ministry on weekends. I thought, well, this has got to be right. I mean, we met in church. He's a Christian. That was really all I was paying attention to. I was kind of ignoring red flags. Then I get into the marriage, and now these red flags that maybe other people warned me about and saw are really coming into the light. And I'm like, wow, I missed this. And now I'm learning and I'm growing in my faith. My faith was very new when I got married. Maybe I was only walking steady in my faith for 3 or 4 years. So I'm getting stronger in my faith. I'm becoming more resilient. I'm understanding my value and my worth. I'm really growing. I'm in therapy, dealing with kind of my issues with my mom and my past and the past relationship and that abuse. I stand up in a courtroom and I face my abuser, and I face, this giant in my life that I always felt held back. Remember leaving that courtroom, I left a different person, and I started my healing journey even in a greater capacity. I really dove into therapy. I really wanted to be the best version of myself. I wanted to be whole, and I wanted to be healthy. And I always thought, if I could be whole and healthy, because I was always like the one that was the problem one, then I would fix the things that weren't right in my marriage. I would be more lovable. I would be, whole and healthy, so, everything would be right. And as that happened, nothing changed in the marriage. Then I thought our marriage was 2008, and we're dealing with money issues. And I talked about that in our last episode. And I thought, okay, how can I help? How can I partner? How can I be a partner? And I was kind of pushed to go work. And I think ultimately, he had pushed me, but really it was ultimately God pushing me out of my box and continuing to help me dive into my self-worth through this beautiful brand. So as I discover gifts and talents, I'm getting not only healthier, but I'm becoming more confident. I'm seeing my value. I'm seeing my worth. I am a different person. And as I continued to change and grow, there was only one person changing and growing, the other person not so much. So there became a really wide gap. Our relationship, already in crisis, already having a strain, continued to be more difficult. And now, when I was just dealing with it, again, thinking if I could just fix me and be better, never enough was kind of a theme for me. But then, if I could fix it with money, if I can have a career and I can contribute and I could take and ease the burden financially, that's going to fix everything. And I pursued that. And that's what I did. I went out to partner and to help, and I did it, but I did it alone. I still never had my partner. I didn't have a partner in business. I didn't have someone I could come home to and say, wow, this day was awful, and have anyone that understood and met me there with encouragement, or would show up at the door of a store at 11 o'clock at night with, a healthy meal. I didn't have that. I felt very much alone in my marriage, and I very much craved that partnership, that helper, that friend. So the gap continues to get wider. Well, now I am a Christian. I have fought the fight. I have overcome so much adversity. I am, like, we've got this. We're going to fix this. But our family was in crisis. It's trickling over to our children, and they're feeling it. It's not just me. And I felt, I could deal with it. I can handle it. I'm an adult. And if I'm not going to get the love that I felt like I would love to have, or the friendship or the partnership or the dreamer and schemer, person in my life, that's fine. I resolved the fact that that's just not what I'm going to get. And I'll find love through my business. I'll find love through my children in every other capacity. But that's just something I don't need. But then I started seeing it trickling over to our children. And I will tell you, part of the thing, part of the reason I did not want to get a divorce was my faith, number one. Number two was what it would do to our children. I wanted to give them the best life ever. I was the woman who was all about making beautiful memories and beautiful moments for our children in our home so that they would have fond memories of their childhood. It was something that I was trying to do because of what happened in my childhood. The last thing I wanted was divorce. People around me would say, I will say my sister especially, would call me and say, Chaz, what are you doing? This is not healthy. This is not healthy for your children. I beg you. I beg you. And I would say after time and time and time again, I can't do it. I can't do it. It'll blow up my children's lives. I just can't do it. I can't bear the burden to just blow up their life. That's the words I used. And I will tell you, my kids were feeling it. We were all feeling it. So now we are, everything looks good on the outside. Linden and Flax is born. I'm making money and contributing to the household. I'm becoming the breadwinner. I'm becoming the one that's kind of taking control of finances and everything. And I thought that would relieve the pain. Remember in episode 2, I believe it was, and episode 3, I shared how this area of scripture, Proverbs 31, was so impactful to me because I always looked at her as being the perfect wife. And I always strived to be the perfect wife. It was a constant. It was what I was striving to be. It was what I was told I was not constantly. And I was like, well, if I could just be her, then I will solve the problems. If I could just make money, I will solve the problems. If I'm just a great mom, I will solve the problems. But I couldn't fix it no matter how hard I tried. But I started seeing Proverbs 31 differently. And instead of seeing Proverbs 31 of what I needed to do for him, I started looking at this woman that God gave as an example for me. And she was more than a wife. She was an entrepreneur, and she took care of her family. And this breadwinner was not to be better than my husband. This was to provide for my kids. This was to be their glue. This was to be their constant, their steady, their anchor. And I looked at her and I looked at the effort that I had put into another basket, and I shifted that effort because I felt like it was just like filling a bucket that had a hole at the bottom. And I would constantly fill and fill and fill, and it would just nothing would happen. But I started filling the bucket of my family and my children and what they needed. And I saw that they were hurt, and I saw that they were broken. I saw that they saw too much. They saw too much fighting. They saw me being diminished in my role. They saw me being diminished as a human. It would upset them, and it would cause conflict between them and their father. And they would stand up for me, and it would hurt them. And I started realizing that they were being diminished, and they were almost being ridiculed for loving me and protecting me, is how they felt. And it was so unhealthy on so many levels. So the move really shifted from how can I endure to how can they endure this? And this is almost abusive for me to allow them to stay in this. What am I doing as a mother? I always wanted to show them what love looked like. So I would fake it kind of till I made it. And I remember even saying one day in our family room, I said, if you could just fake it, just pretend that you like me for our kids. That's what they need to be whole and healthy humans. They need to see a relationship. And if you don't feel it, that's fine. I don't even need it at this point. I just need you to fake it. It's pretty sad, right? It's pretty low. I mean, we're like, really? Just fake that you like me. And I just didn't want to dissolve the family. I didn't think that a family could exist after a divorce. I didn't know that a family unit could look whole after a divorce if it was broken. The way I thought divorce looked was, you're a failure, and the whole title of a divorcee and my kids having to say their parents are divorced. I just didn't want it for them. I was a dreamer. I pictured this life that really, this is important. I kind of had a vision of what I wanted, and I lived in a fairy tale world. I wasn't experiencing that. We weren't as a family, but I was staying for what I thought could be. If I could just get to that, it's worth it. But I couldn't get there because I couldn't get there alone. It takes two. So here we are. There were some things that happened that were pivotal points, but one of the pivotal points where I made the decision was I had a really good girlfriend of mine who went through a very difficult divorce, and she shared her journey, and I walked with her through it, and it was hard, and it was terrible, and it was painful. And I ended up seeing her find the love of her life, and I saw happiness, and I was like, wow, it really worked for you. It worked out for you. And I saw God's hand on her, and I saw that she was a faithful woman of faith, and she did this, and it ended up being the best thing for her and her family. But this same woman, this friend of mine, could see the pain that I was in because she walked through it. And so although I would smile and look pretty to strangers, to Instagram, to you, she saw, and she would see me being diminished and my value, my worth, and she would just see it very clearly. And she would call me almost on a daily basis. And she says, listen, I'm just telling you, you need to see an attorney. You have to see an attorney. You have to protect yourself. I'm just telling you. I can see it. I can see what's going to happen, and you are not going to be protected. You need to see an attorney. So after months of her calling, I had no desire to get a divorce. My sister begging me, friends begging me, friends coming to us saying, you guys got to just separate. Everyone could see it that knew us, but behind the walls at football games, at the stores, wherever, people thought everything was perfect. So I went to see an attorney. That was a really big pivotal move. When I went to see the attorney, she met with me, and after I just shared kind of all the details with her, she knew that I needed to get a divorce. And she encouraged it, but she knew that I wasn't ready for it. She was very wise, and she could read the room. And she's like, I know you're not ready emotionally, but I'm telling you, it is exactly what needs to happen, and this is not healthy for your family. And because I was the glue and truly was the one that my kids looked to for answers, it was a responsibility that I felt like I had, but I just didn't have the courage. I was so conflicted with my faith and what it would do to my kids. So she took me and she said, I want to take you for a walk. And she walked me downstairs. Actually, we got in the elevator, we went downstairs, and she introduced me to Allison, who is now my therapist. And she says, Allison, I want you to meet with her. And I just want you to talk to her. And I think you guys should meet once a week. So we chose Mondays. I cleared my schedule every Monday, and I told my team that I would be out on Mondays, and that was the day that I would meet my therapist. I knew that I needed to meet with her. It was only an hour, but I knew that I am a processor, that I needed to process everything that she said to me and really make sense of what she was saying, because I really wanted to make this decision the right way, what is best for my kids. That's all I could think about. They were the forefront of my mind. So 3, 4, 5 weeks in, she tells me, after she hears my heart, she hears about my marriage, she says, Chaz, you are a fixer and you want to fix this, but you do not have the power to fix this. You cannot fix this. And this is why you can't fix it. And she listed why. And they were all very valid. She had me read some great resources about things that we were dealing with in the home. And she said, you cannot fix it. You've been trying to fix it. You cannot do it alone. And this is how it will be. It will not change. This is as far as you're going to go. And it was truth. And I knew it was truth. And I heard it. And it was a pivotal point in my journey with divorce. I left her room. I still didn't have the courage. I processed it all day. I knew it was the right thing. I called my sister. And I'm like, I know it's the right thing, but I just can't do it. You got to pray for me. And she's like, I'm going to tell you one thing. I'm going to stop calling you until you do it, because I can't handle to watch what's happening to you and those children and my niece and nephew. So another point that really there was a shift. There were many things. Police were called to our home. There were many things, but it was Christmas. And I had purchased the cottage a few months back in May. Again, rah, rah, we finally got a vacation home. Like, that's going to solve all of our problems. You should be so happy. Well, it brought no happiness. It brought happiness to me and the kids. And we ended up going to Rosemary often and decorating it. And me and the boys driving a U-Haul down. And so finally we get my ex to come see the house. It's been about 6 months. It's Christmas. You know, my whole thing with building this business was always creating memories and moments in the home. And I just thought if I could create one more beautiful memory, one more amazing, magical Christmas, all the problems go away. That's just how I would trick myself. And so I do just that. And it imploded. And that was kind of my last straw. I realized that Rosemary, a vacation home, you know, gifts under the tree, a fire in the fireplace, hot cocoa brewing, Christmas music on, it doesn't fix problems. It's temporal. You know, it's just a moment of satisfaction, but you could look across the room and you still knew that nothing was fixed, nothing was healed, nothing was whole. It was a charade. And so it kind of imploded there. And there was a moment when, again, I stayed for my children. Jacqueline was about to go off to college. Christian's still in high school. Riley's in college. Everybody was struggling, was weary. It was heavy every holiday, every vacation, every day. But we're still together, right? But when this imploded in Rosemary, I watched my daughter cry out to her father. And I watched her call his name multiple times. And when he left Rosemary without his family and her yelling for him, and he had a suitcase rolling down the street the day after Christmas, and he never turned around, I thought, he can hurt me. He can do all he needs to do for me. It was clear he did not love me. It was clear that he resented me very much. But he's not going to do that to them. And it was kind of the final straw. I was called to be their protector, not just their provider, but their protector, their peace, their anchor, and their rock. And for me to continue to allow her to be hurt, the kids to be hurt, to see, you know, that this is not what love looks like. This is not what marriage looks like. I don't want them to grow up and get married and have a marriage like ours. I mean, quite the opposite. What am I showing them? And as a woman, what am I showing my daughter who continues to stay and continues to be spoken to the way she was spoken to? What was I showing her by staying? Was I showing her that I was a superhero? Or was I showing her that this is okay to be treated like this? That day I made a decision to call a divorce attorney, the same one I met with in the room months prior. And I called her and I said, I want a divorce. Now, one thing she told me is when she was trying to encourage me to get a divorce, she said, Chaz, I had such a conflict with my faith. I said, I just can't do it. In fact, I'm just going to wait till he divorces me because I know he wants to. He's said that. He's said it to the kids. He's told us all. I'm just going to wait for him to do it. She said, you need to do this because she knew my story. I told her about my past. She knew what I've gone through. She knew what I walked through. She says, you need to take power back. You need to do this for you. You need to take control of your life. And by you filing for divorce, that is taking control of your life and your children's life. And that is who you are. And so I did that. I filed for divorce. I filed for freedom. I filed for peace. I filed for the benefit of my children, that they would no longer watch me be diminished, my gifts, my talents, the lack of respect. I did this so my kids could wake up in a peaceful home and not hear yelling and screaming and silence also for days on end. I did this for health, to be healthy and whole, so that we could be healthy and whole. And I finally made this D word, which was like, once it looked like a weapon, it became our freedom. And divorce, I knew was going to be hard. I knew it was going to be a journey. I knew that it would be the fight of my life. I also knew that I had to come to terms with God on it. And I prayed, I wept, I asked God to forgive me. And I had to find peace with God because I truly was so against divorce. And I think I even judged people before that got divorced. But I look at it differently now because I know how hard I tried and I gave it everything I got. And my kids say till this day, they're like, we know that you gave it everything you got. And it was important to me that they saw that and that they knew that. But I look at divorce differently. I look at it as sometimes I used to think divorce was not an option, but sometimes I think it's the only option. And that was my only option for me and for us. So the divorce began. It was, like I said, the fight of my life. It was as ugly gets. I had an attorney who's been an attorney for 30 years, and she says she's never seen anything like it. It was wicked. It was vile. It was demoralizing. I had to take a lot, and I had to sit there and I had to take it. And I did it with the power of God, the grace of God. And there were accusations publicly thrown against me. There were accusations through attorneys. It was terrible to the point where my attorney said, I won't even tell you what's coming in today. I will not tell you this because I know who you are and this is not you. We don't even need to discuss it. I knew it was going to be hard, but I knew that I also had a really big God because I know this is what's beautiful about faith. When you walk through hard things, you know that you get through them. And I had walked through hard things. I had stood up against against an abuser. I had stood up for so many things in my life. And I had overcome hard things and I had become resilient and I knew I could get through this. My sister, I will tell you, I was surrounded by amazing people. My sister would constantly remind me. I would go walking and she would call me and she would just remind me of who God was, not who I was, but who I could lean into to get through this, who my kids could lean into. And she was a constant rock and reminder of God's grace and goodness. And she would just say, He is for you. That's what she kept telling me through all the hard days. He is for you, Chaz. The battle belongs to Him. It's not your battle. You don't have to fight it. He's got you. And He did. He had me. And He had me and He had our kids. And you know what He did? That's a beautiful thing. Divorce, when you think about it, you think about it's the end of a family. It's the end of a dream. And you do have to grieve it because I was grieving the fairy tale. I wasn't grieving the marriage because when I looked at the marriage, there was never this love that I always wanted. There was never a partnership. There wasn't even a friendship really at the time that we divorced. There was really nothing to really grieve, but I grieved the dream that I wanted to give my children, the dream of the perfect family, the dream of a lake house one day with an American flag and the kids roll up with their Jeep with the carload of kids and they see mom and dad. That's what I grieved, is this make-believe thing. And I think a lot of us stay in situations because of this fairy tale that we have in our head and this idea of what the marriage is. But if you look at it, it's not really that. And so I had to let go of that. I had to grieve my dream, my process. I had to grieve for my children that I wasn't going to give them the dream. And once I walked through that and started healing past that, I'm telling you, I became the best version of myself. I knew that the most important thing for me in this time was to make sure my kids knew they were loved. Because in divorce, they don't feel loved. They feel like maybe it's their fault. And I think my kids felt that in some ways. I think they also were very confused because we, on the outside, all of their friends thought we were the perfect couple, but then they lived in our home and they knew they weren't. So there was confusion. They knew we were not. So I just knew I had to love them and I had to be their rock. And I knew that, I had to answer the questions and they didn't understand why. And they couldn't communicate with their father. And that's sad because they had a lot of questions and I couldn't give them all the answers because I couldn't communicate for him. And I really wanted to do it the right way. And I wanted to continue to encourage them to go talk with your dad. You need to talk with your dad. I tried to encourage him, talk with the kids. And I would tell them, I don't have all the answers. I can tell you I can tell you what I believe. I can tell you what I think is best for us. I can be here and listen to you till 2 a.m. A lot of nights we had those conversations, car rides, we had those conversations, at lunches, we had those conversations, at dinners, we had these conversations. There's confusion. There still is a lot of healing that needs to take place, but getting to the other side, I see a daughter who is thriving at Ole Miss in college, and she smiles differently. She still has pain for the brokenness of her relationship with her dad, but she's understood and learned how to cope because she's watched me cope, and she will tell me that. She's like, I watched you. And sometimes we don't have all the answers, but we adapt. I see Christian, and I've heard coaches and teachers and everyone say, it's so great to see him smile again. His grades are amazing now. I mean, our kids were suffering with their grades. They were emotionally suffering. You know, kids watching a marriage fall apart is hard. And a hostile marriage, a marriage where there's fighting and arguments, a marriage that is dipping over onto the kids, it's really unhealthy. It's really bad. And so I see Riley now. He's become this amazing entrepreneur. This is a kid that, you know, felt the burden for me to take care of me and to step up and be the man of the house, which was not his role. And then we've watched him just bloom, and he has become such an incredible entrepreneur. Our kids are good. And I just want to be a voice that says, you can do hard things. Your kids can do hard things. What I've learned is my kids and your kids are resilient, and they adapt to a new normal. And we have a new normal. We have a new house. We have a new life. Everything is new. We left a lot of the old. We left their family home. They had to adapt to that. Was it hard? 100%. I'm not going to sit here and say it was easy. That was their home. They don't understand why they're not in their home. They don't understand why we're not together till this day. They don't understand. And they may never, right? And that's just the chance you have to take. But I do see glimpses of it where I see and I hear in conversations, I get it. I see why. Oh, I remember when. And they start connecting the dots. The constant has been that I continue to love them and provide security. And I've leaned into love. When you don't have the answers, that's where you lean. You just lean into loving them and listening to them and hearing them and even saying, I don't have all the answers, but I know this, that I love you and I am here for you and I am your constant and I will be present. I will be what you need, all that I can. And you have a really big God who's even greater. And he is your heavenly Father, and he is your dad, and he is your provider ultimately. I'm so grateful for linen and flax. Let me tell you, if it wasn't for this brand, we wouldn't have this freedom. I wouldn't have been able to endure this divorce. I wouldn't have. Divorces are expensive. And it nearly broke me. I'm still rebuilding. But a lot of women that I've met in the DM say they're stuck because they don't have the luxury of getting a divorce because they can't afford it. I will tell you, I talked to my attorney. There are options for women that don't have a job. Maybe you have been a stay-at-home mom and you're like, I've talked to you in the DMs. You're like, I don't know what to do. You have a job. I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know how I'm going to support my family. I will tell you this. God has provided. I didn't know how I was going to support my family, even though I had a job. It's expensive. It's expensive doing it alone. College is expensive. Everything's expensive, but God has provided, and he will provide for you just like he did for me. I am not special. I'm just his daughter, just like you. And he will provide for you, and he will provide for your children. He will make a way. Remember, he is able. Remember what my sister continued to tell me, that he is for you. And if he calls you down this road or you go down this road, he will walk with you. He was my constant. You know, I keep saying I was my kid's constant. God was my constant, and he got me through this hard stuff, and he got me to the other side of it. And let me just briefly tell you about the other side. The other side is healthy. I can breathe. I was in survival mode. I've talked to you about that. Survival mode is not good. Survival mode for our children is not good. I was unhealthy. I was mentally unfocused. I was drained. I was gassed. I was hurting. Today, I sit here on this couch. I am whole. I am clear. I am healthy. I am the best version of myself. I have come into my own. I can sit here at 49 years old and say that I am the best I've ever been. And that is because of the grace of God and also the work that I've put in from healing to whole health, spiritually, mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually. And it is crucial and it is vital and it is important in your walk with divorce. Do not do it alone. Get your tribe, get your people, lock them in, lean into your God, and survive it. And then get to the other side and you're going to breathe. I am proof of that. You will smile again. You will laugh again. You will love. And you will find love and you will find hope. And you might find love through your children. You might find it through your work. You might find it through a person. But there's so much good out there. Look into my eyes and know that and believe that. I hope what you heard today is encouragement. Not encouragement to get divorced, but encouragement to get to the other side of divorce. Encouragement to embrace who you are and put yourself at the top of the list. You know, I didn't think I was worthy to be happy. I just felt like this is my lot in life. This is what I will be. I will just be unhappy, unloved, and I'll find love through my work and through my children. That's a lie. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be healthy and whole. You deserve to have a family unit. And my family unit looks different. It's not because of an absence of a person. It's because of who we are. We've never been tighter, me and my 3 children. We've never been tighter because we've walked through a lot together and it bonded us. We've had a lot of late night talks. We've had a lot of early morning walks. We've gone there and we were there for each other. I couldn't have gotten through it without my children. I say I was their constant. They were my constant. There were many days I'm like, I don't know that I can do this. And I'd see that little smile from Christian and he'd say, Mommy, you've got this. I remember Christian sitting on the hearth in our family room and I was crying and I was a mess and I was broken because of this dream that I wanted for my kids and my family. And he said, Mommy, I need you to be strong. And that was the day I committed that I would not cry in front of him and that I would be strong for him and I would be the best version of myself for him. And that started my wellness journey about 2.5 years ago. I look at Jacqueline when I was having a hard day and she's like, you got this, Mommy. You're the strongest person I know. I'd look into Riley's eyes and he's like, Mommy, you've got this. I've got you. Whatever you need, we've got this together. Those 3 kids of mine became my constant. So if you have love, you can get through anything. You can heal your kids' broken hearts. You can heal your heart. You can get through hard things. I found my love in Jesus, honestly. And the darkest time of my life, I found it through him. And he filled me with what I needed to love my children so that they could get through the hard things. I know that if they ever face this in their life, and I hope they never do, they will be able to handle it in a way that pleases God. I think there's 2 ways you could do divorce. It could be ugly and terrible and nasty, or you could rise up and try to do it the best way possible. And that is what I tried. When that divorce began, I thought they have been through hell already. I'm going to try to make this as easy as possible for them. And I believe that that's what our responsibility is for our kids. So I wrap all of this up to say, no one ever dreams of divorce. That's not something you ever hear. I dream of divorce. But sometimes, what I've noticed and I've seen in my life, that this divorce, although I didn't want it, I don't encourage it, I don't believe in it, it was the very best thing for myself and my family. It brought us whole and into a path of healing. We were hurt and we were broken. And I look at it like, this is the analogy in my head. Like we were in a hospital with just bandages everywhere. And now we've come out and we walked away and we're not in a wheelchair anymore. We're not bound up. We're walking in freedom. We're walking into this new life, a new normal for sure. But it's a beautiful thing. There is happiness now. People see me and they're like, your face is different. Your smile is brighter. I was walking around heavy and I was walking around tired and I was walking around sad. There is a joy. There is a weight that has been lifted. There is a peace that surpasses all understanding. I'm telling you, for me, divorce saved my life. And I sometimes look back and I think, how did I do that for 21 years? But I have the 3 greatest things ever that came from that marriage. And that is my 3 amazing kids. There are no regrets. And I think the redeeming piece of divorce is just that. You built a life, but you have these beautiful kids. And that's sometimes how I make ends meet with it is, you know what? I don't understand all of it, but I have these 3 amazing kids, and that is a beautiful thing. So if you want to hear more about all the stories, make sure you're following along, subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow along at all of our social channels, Linen and Flax Co., Chatting with Chaz. I am going to be diving into so much. We're going to have some fun. We've talked about all the heavy. We've talked about all the chapters. I wanted to kind of build this story in chapters so you could see how we got to today sitting on this couch. There will be questions like, oh, are you married? Are you not married? Are you divorced? You know me now. I feel like over the past 4 episodes, you've gotten to know me. Now we're going to have some fun. I have some really amazing guests coming. I'm going to keep that a surprise, but stay tuned because you're going to freak out. I have really fun topics I want to talk about. We're going to go there. We're going to talk about everything. I mean, everything. So stay tuned, follow along. I look forward to chatting with Chaz with you on this couch on many more episodes to come. Take care, and I will see you next week.